Dr. Price. Question for Santa Price. That's what they said. Martin Gatt.
The Maltese Falcon.
The Gospels are totally fascinating in how they use subtext to convey something not allowed. For instance, in John 18:6, why did those who went to arrest Jesus stepped back and fell to the ground? What is the author trying to tell us by this? My Revelation 12 project is still in progress. I won't forget to send a pic when it's done. Happy New Year's. Thanks from Martin Gatt from Malta.
If this is, I tell you what, the incident with the Roman soldiers being like a bunch of 10 pins, bowling pins there, it's obvious enough, even if you couldn't compare it with Matthew, to say that this cannot be historical, and the reason it's in there is to say, look, Jesus was in control. As he says elsewhere in the gospel, no one takes my life from me. I lay it down of my own free will. Or he says to Pilate, you'd have no authority over me unless it were granted to you from above. I mean, that's the whole idea. Don't get the wrong idea. He's in control. And of course, it can't be true because he's got, I think the cohort or whatever of soldiers, it's like hundreds of soldiers there to arrest this one guy. What is this? Also, the whole idea that he's just saying, you're looking for me, and boom, that's absurd. And I don't think we're supposed to take it seriously. It's pretty transparent what's going on, and it might even be a kind of a rewrite of Matthew's Gethsemane scene, where the more modest force comes to address him, and Peter says, should we strike with the sword? And he said, look, don't you realize I could ask my Father to send 12 legions of angels? Because there's the thousands, it's just switched to the other team. And we could have Armageddon right here. But if we did, how would the scripture be fulfilled that says it must happen? The same idea, even the same image, basically. That, look, I'm in control, don't worry. It's all going according to plan. I mean, both of them are, that's clearly the point.
I have to poke Dr. Bob. You know, man, when a light bulb goes off, you know I have to say something. This takes me back to your debate with Dr. Ehrman. Your whole point, I feel, with all the big language for people who just went way over their head or like water off a duck's back, could not see what you were trying to say, is what you're saying right there sounds so fictional. I mean, like, dude, that sounds comic booky. That sounds like a manufactured narrative right there. It doesn't sound like it has any historical basis. I'm not saying there couldn't be stuff it's drawing from that might have historical basis, but itself looks like a comic book. How can you play in that with Dr. Ehrman? And like, you guys were looking at this thing completely different and describing what you just did there. He's the guy who's the critical scholar. So I love what he does. I'm not trying to bash, but I am trying to say, someone who sees this and these things, how can you look at one and say, oh, there's Roman soldiers that come up and they flop on their face like they're dead. And the other one is saying, I can get legions, same kind of concept, but it's of angels rather than... How can you tell me there's any historical significance to that part in that?
Well, I imagine Bart would admit that this is mythical or legendary, but that doesn't mean the whole darn thing is.
Right.
And like Harnack said that. He said, of course, there are legendary accretions to this, but that doesn't, that happens often with known characters who are known to have been historical.
How do you draw that line, though? Do you see what I mean?
Well, partly by the principle of analogy. The thing with the Roman troops, who, by the way, they just get up and dust themselves off. Nothing is said about this, right? In the book of Judges, when Samuel kills 1,000 men with a brittle jawbone of a donkey, you ever tried to picture this in your mind? Did they all line up and take turns? Wham! Next! Wham! Next! Of course not. You're not really supposed to pursue it that far. It's like the way Chronicles beefs up the numbers from the same stories in Samuel and Kings. How many troops were in this battle? It's become metaphorical, and it's like, or another one, when Elijah roasts these 150 soldiers sent to arrest him, and the king sends another 150 who heard about the last guys. Says, would you mind coming along with us peacefully? Oh, yeah. When he burns them up too. And the next group comes up, says, have mercy, O man of God. And he's about to throw the old fireball again, but an angel tells him, no, go with him this time. And he does. Of course, that's comic book stuff. This guy's become the Human Torch. But of course, originally he's a sun god, so that's the point of the imagery. But you can almost forgive that. It's so patently obvious what's going on there. But in the New Testament, when Jesus and the disciples are trying to book some rooms in the Samaritan Holiday Inn, and say, hey, get out of here, we don't want your kind here. And James and John say to Jesus, Master, do you want us to call down fire to roast these bastards like Elijah did? And Jesus shakes his head and he says, you just don't get what kind of spirit you belong to. The Son of Man came to save men's lives, not to destroy them. A great, great story. But can you really imagine James and John being schizophrenic lunatics who actually thought they could call down fire from it? It's absurd. And so it's like when you try to dress up myth as history, then you just have to say, no, this can't be right. They'd be crazy if they did this. Because it's like Jesus isn't saying, what are you talking about? You think you could call down? No, he just says, no, we're not going to do it. Because we could, but we're not going to. It's impossible. And the thing is, it's not that the impossibility doesn't lie so much with what they're contemplating doing, but rather the idea that they are contemplating this. Come on.
Yeah, that's what makes it less probable that this is historical. I mean, I can imagine people who are superstitious to a point they literally self-delude themselves to a point they think they can do something. I'm going to jump off this building. Watch me.
But they'd be in a straitjacket,
right? Or
and they're not pictured that way. They're supposed to be. They were mundane people doing hard work every day, and then they follow this guy, which is unlikely in a way, but not really implausible. Jesus summons them, and they take a look at what they're doing, and they're thinking, I'm hearing the voice of destiny. I'm being called to a greater thing. This is my chance. I'm going to take it. I mean, that too is a great story and psychologically plausible. But thinking you could call down fire from heaven, you'd have to be a lunatic.
What do you think, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, what do you think about the idea that Theodus and the Samaritan and these other rebellious Jews, and not just Jews, the Samaritan is obviously not a Jew, but these other rebels that were obviously spoken of in Josephus, one of them saying he's going to go and split the Jordan River, or, I'm going to go show you where the buried treasure is on the Mount Gerizim, where Moses buried the treasure. It sounds superstitious, almost like I wonder if they were crazy enough to think, you know what, we have the power. Just like a lot of Jews thought they could invoke and create the Armageddon to happen. They thought, we just lay one sword on a Roman and God will come in with his name. They believed in crazy stuff, not saying it's not possible. I'm with you in saying, man, this sounds so fictitious because it's borrowing from other narratives. It's hard to say that's historical. But could they be crazy, fanatics running around saying stuff like that?
Yeah, they could. It's just like elsewhere in the tradition, like when Jesus withers the fig tree, Peter says, look at this, the fig tree's withered. Like, he knows that's impossible, and he's amazed. But these other two jerks are going to call down fire from heaven? I mean, the one is at least kind of superficially plausible. The characters are written with a kind of believable motivation and expectation, but these other guys, again, it's like the Human Torch. Yeah. And that's, but with Theudas the magician, he was called, and the Egyptian, you get the impression that they really thought they could do this because they were hopped up on biblical tradition. If Joshua could do it, it's the same God. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. I guess God can allow us to do it. This is more in the league with somebody throwing away their kids' insulin because Dr. Jesus will heal them. They have passed into they're next door to insanity. They have a kind of faith delusion. Anybody that goes to a healing rally is kind of like Theudas because they're laying it on the line here. Hey, everybody watch this. And you got to figure that they were pretty crushed when it didn't happen. Like Harold Camping, the world is going to end on so-and-so date. He must have believed that. He wasn't a raving lunatic. He had just gone too far in these beliefs. Yeah. The Jehovah's Witnesses. Obviously, they thought this would happen, but it's just like a miscalculation. They're believing that Bible, and they know they're going against the grain. With God, all things are possible. But it's quite proper to bring up the comparison, but it seems to me there's a different shade of what's going on here.
I think you're right, because even your example with a withering fig tree, for me, that's obviously a fictional tale. And the meaning of that tale isn't, Jesus can wither fig trees. That's not even the point. Like, can you imagine if someone literally made your bookcase behind you literally evaporate right now? But the whole point wasn't that you could evaporate the bookcase. It was just to point out, don't have those kind of books. Those books are out of season, and you shouldn't have those books. Those books are actually not true. Dude, you just evaporated a bookcase, okay? The whole point, I think, any normal person reading or even visibly seeing something like that would go, dude, how did you do that? How did you make the tree just wither right now? That tells me there's fiction there. So the same kind of analogy is portrayed in that burning and sending fire down. I think could be compared to that. So I'm with you. It's just hard, you can look at it and see fanatics thinking crazy stuff's going to happen, but there is another level at which they're able to call fire down right now from heaven. Hey, you want me to go ahead and do this right now? That's so over the top, and nobody's questioning, can they not? There wasn't any of that going on. So yeah, I think I'm with you on that. That's a good point. It's very hard to distinguish, though, if you're not looking carefully.
Like, how are the characters portrayed? That's the dead giveaway sometimes. You expect there to be miracles and stuff in these stories, but like the fig tree thing, this has been cleverly sandwiched in with the cleansing of the temple in Mark. Matthew separates them, but Mark has, he goes into the city, looks around at everything, and leaves, and on, I guess, the way back, he's hungry, goes to the fig tree, nothing on it. May no one ever eat from you again. Zap. They go back to Bethany. The next day, they go back to the temple, and on the way, they see it's withered. Wow. Well, it's obvious by this juxtaposition that the fig tree withering has been made into a metaphor for the bankruptcy of the temple. Jesus comes looking for repentance, and he doesn't find it, and so he predicts it's going to be destroyed. Well, that's a very brilliant, creative stunt, but Mark left too much of the original in there, because when they say, how on earth did the fig tree wither, Jesus says, oh, anybody can do that if you just have faith. You can say to this thing, be withered, and it will be. That's encouraging fanatical faith. And that's why you eventually, I did this article once called The Retreat from Radical Prayer. Since these, and there are loads of promises like this, ask anything in my name and I will do it. Well, obviously it doesn't work. And so that's why in virtually every case in the New Testament, as soon as something like that is said, there's a proviso. If you ask in my name, if you believe that it's happened, and stuff like that, there's always an escape clause, because now the writer knows this doesn't happen, and so he's adding, oh, here's why it didn't, you can trust Jesus to heal you. That doesn't seem to have healed. Well, I guess you didn't have enough faith. How do you, I think even the thing where he says, believe that you have received it and you will receive it, in Mark 11 as well, I think. That's ostensibly inculcating faith, but it's poisoned. Well, how much faith is enough?
Yeah.
How do I know I have enough faith? Because there's always going to be that element of doubt, as you see in the story where the father with a demoniac son says, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. That's the most psychologically shrewd and realistic insight into the problem of faith. But it's in there to get God off the, well, if you really had enough faith, things would be different, but...
Kind of like how through the history of the Old Testament, the narrative, if you will, every time, Israel gets conquered. Egypt, Assyria, Medes, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Babylonian, and every time it's you, Bobby, why didn't you go on Sabbath last week? Or, there's always some we didn't do what we were supposed to do. And then so they're getting their God off the hook. The problem is, and this is what I pointed out, and I was trying to do this more with Dr. Joshua Bowen, who, he's a Syriologist, or he reads all the different languages. He knows all this stuff, and he knows Hebrew. We were talking about false promises, or if you will, failed promises. One of the issues, we can point out flaws with Daniel and whose authorship and where the failure of prophecy stops, so we know how to date it, all that good stuff. The problem is, when you go back to Jeremiah, when you go back to the law, there are promises from God that he's going to do these things. So they keep getting God off the hook. Oh, you messed up. God didn't say 70 years. He meant 70 weeks of years. And they kept pushing these things because I think it's obvious that when you really stop putting the blame on the Israelite people and the prophets blaming themselves, and why are we in this predicament? you really see these promises that really set up, if you carefully look, where Yahweh promised he was going to do these things. But there's that clause. They always try to, well, if. It didn't sound like if. It sounded like one day God's going to.
Yeah.
And so as long as they live up to this standard someday, who knows when that'll happen, it'll end up happening. And that's a sad way to live, constantly never questioning the foundation to your entire premise. It's like...
But they go right back to the thing to get God exonerated, because what's the alternative? Saying, well, obviously this whole thing is a sham. We've been barking up the wrong tree. There is no God, or God is not interested in us. I don't know why we ever thought he was. And you just drop it. How does that fit with being in a world of constant threats by great empires and all that? You're still going to suffer, but you want hope as well, and you're not going to have it if you say, oh, look, this is obviously... Like Richard Rubinstein, one of the Jewish death of God theologians, in his book After Auschwitz, he says, come on, let's get real. If God can allow these promises of us being the chosen people are just meaningless. Let's stop it, because we're actually inviting more of the same by claiming we're the chosen people. It took a lot of guts to say that.
I don't want at all the identity of the Jews to ever go away, and I feel like that's a fear, that if they don't believe the way that they should, that their identity, in some sense, we've talked about this, the wall won't be up, so then they're just going to assimilate, and then no more. They're going to lose all the customs and whatnot. But I know that there are a lot of Jews that are Jews, race-wise, who choose not to actually believe in fact, they're atheists and agnostics or whatnot. And so I get that, you know what I mean? But and I think they see what we're talking about here, and they're like, yeah, I'm with you on that. But I am a Jew, and I prefer to customly, practice Judaism. I stay away. I refrain from certain diets. Those type of things. It's all kosher, whatnot. And I have a lot of respect. Like, I understand that. Like, if that was my custom, for example, a lot of African Americans who are very pro-Africa will wear the African flag, and they want to represent their culture and their country. That's like something I totally, think. But do they go around acting like their specific tribe's deity is the one and only true deity that they were taught? Some might. But I think most just carry on the custom, and that's something I think is really cool, without getting too stuck in the superstition of these stories that make them believe them, literally. Dude, we ran from Malta like crazy, did we not? This started with you, man. I blame you, okay? This is not our fault. In fact, we're getting off the hook. We have a clause here, Martin. And that was, what is our clause? We need to come up with something to get off the hook of escaping his John 18, talking about the fall into the ground. But anyway, he says his My Revelation 12 project is still in progress.
I don't remember what that is.
Dr. Price needs to know what you mean. No, but I'm sure he has a project where he's dealing with something in Revelation 12, so we'll definitely be looking out for that. And thank you, Dr. Price.
I suspect he means an artistic project, because he's a talented artist, and I have a hunch he's going to depict something in Revelation. I can't wait to see it if that's the case.
Awesome. Thank you for the question, and thank you, Dr. Price.